Welcome to the Mastermind series organized by Chamberlain University. Today, we will be having a discussion about rethinking strategy during COVID-19 and beyond. I will be welcoming Kim Ramsey, who I'll be introducing shortly. But first, let me set the stage to some of the things that's going on around us and the times that we are in today. Some of you may have heard of the term VUCA World. So VUCA is an acronym which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and simply ambiguous times. You know, when I think of the onset of COVID-19 and everything that the world has been experiencing, this kind of becomes an ideal situation and a time to reflect in terms of a VUCA world. So during this time, we have had a lot of things change and a lot of things evolve to an extent that we have not experienced in our lifetimes. You also hear the term the new normal, where the people are adjusting to a new set of realities. And when I think about this new normal, I think of what is the old normal, or some people call it the BC normal, BC being before Corona. And then you talk about the future, what's going to come, the AD or the future normal, AD being after disease or when after Corona is gone. What is that world going to be like? So this is foundational to our discussion today. My perspective is that the new normal, as we say, or the current period we are in, is truly a transitionary period in which a new and a future normal is being shaped and created as we speak today. If you look around us and see the different changes that's happened and happening, we know fundamentally some of the changes that took place will not take us back to what we fully were before Corona. And some of these changes that are happening, what are these changes? So for example, how we communicate, how we learn, how we consume, how consumers buy things, how we collaborate, how we manage teams, how we lead and empower people. A lot has changed. And some of these changes really helped accelerate changes that otherwise would have probably taken a decade. We were forced to change and adapt because of COVID. Then there are some innovations and new creations that we just simply had to do to get by, to serve the customers that we serve, and so on and so forth. So in this setup, in the new normal, we can really take charge and proactively look at how we can be a part of, how we can be architects of creating that future normal. So in that, I see an amazing opportunity for us to not only step up to get by during the new normal, but what can we do strategically to be even more relevant in that future normal that's being shaped as we go through this new normal. So winning in VUCA times. Let's look at what are some elements that's necessary to win in the VUCA times. First, get your team to safety. Number two, put your team to work. And number three, enter your decision space. So first piece of this is, it's all of our responsibility as leaders. How do we get our team to safety? Now, that includes physical safety. That could be things like giving team the necessary tools to work remotely, all the technologies needed. Emotional and mental safety. How do we empower our teams to really get to that state where they're comfortable, they're supported, they have the tools necessary to be functioning in a headspace that is conducive for them primarily, as well as for the business, as well as those you serve. Financial safety. This includes individual colleagues, your team, your customers, as well as your organization. So if you think of the first two pieces of this, getting your team to safety and put your team to work, it's essentially managing through a disaster. How do we manage through a disaster? But the third piece is entering your decision space, which essentially is talking about how do we relook at our vision, mission, and strategy? Is this an opportunity for us to recreate, rethink, redesign everything that we do and how we service our customers, our clients, or our students? And that's where my guest comes in, who I would like to introduce you now. Kim Ramsey is the founder and president of the Executive Edge. Her national consulting firm specializes in coaching, leadership development, team building, and her team and organization works with organizations in creating vision, mission, and helping organizations strategize. Kim has 20 plus years working in her consulting firm in Fortune 500 companies. Before consulting, Kim had worked in 15 years in leadership roles in corporate America, in companies such as AT&T, Tribune, AC Nielsen, Harris Corporation, and Sony in various organizational development leadership positions. Kim has a master's degree in human resource management and a bachelor's in industrial psychology from the University of Illinois. And I have the distinct honor and pleasure in calling Kim a friend and colleague that I've gotten to know and appreciated and counted on her counsel over the last 10 plus years. Kim, welcome.
I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk with you today regarding strategy. It's a particular passion to me and couldn't be more timely when we talk about strategy in an age of COVID. I really believe that organizations to date have been quite reactive in nature, as we've had to, quite frankly. You talked about operating in an ambiguous world. There are many times when I'm sure that the people who are listening to this broadcast have found themselves having more questions than they have answers. And you're certainly not alone. Whether it is questions around what policies do we want to put in place for working at home? What technology do we need to be putting in place? What ergonomic equipment do we need to put in place as more and more are encountering a remote workforce? The questions are limitless, and it can feel like we're in a sea of ambiguity. And the only way that we can really start to regain control is to take a step back, rethink strategy, and at times we may choose to reset the strategy button. It may be that time right now, and I do sincerely believe it is the perfect time to be looking at strategy.
That's great, Kim, and what a wonderful way to get started. So, there are leaders and others listening who are talking about or thinking, oh my God, there's so much going on. We are dealing with so much of everything that we spoke about. And in the middle of all of that, here's Kim and Ranil here in a discussion talking about now you have to think of strategy as well. So what would you say as to why now and how can they fit strategy in to all the things that they're dealing with today?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. It's an important question because we certainly needed to be in business continuity mode. There's no question that key questions needed to be asked. However, they tended to be reactive in nature, and we certainly do have to be worried about business continuity. But at the same time, if we don't take the time to take the step back right now, in the here and now, we may be missing a window of opportunity that we will regret as an organization downstream. So what I'm going to be challenging us to do is to really take a look at what do we need to do differently? Do we need to change our strategic direction? Can we still be successful with the strategies that we have in achieving the current mission and vision? And so if we are constantly in react mode and purely and 100% from a business continuity perspective, if we're not asking those questions, then we are going to find ourselves in more difficult times as an organization. And so I have found that there's a really good visual that illustrates this. I'm going to refer you to the diffusion of innovation bell curve. And while this was developed by Everett Rogers, a professor of communications back in 1962, I believe that it applies more than ever. And so if we could switch to that graphic, I would really appreciate it. So this bell curve really nicely illustrates how you may want to be looking at your organization. Clearly, there are market leaders or innovators, the ones who are redefining and shaping the future. They want to be on the forefront. They want to make sure that they are seizing the opportunity for market leadership. Then you have your early adopters, or another way to put that is your fast followers. And these people may wait to see what the forerunners are doing, the front runners, and they may react quickly and adopt certain things that are working and certain things that are, avoid the things that aren't. But they're your fast followers. Then you've got your early majority, and they are thinking about how they may need to make some shifts, and then they'll jump on the bandwagon. Then we've got the late majority who will then make some changes. And then last but not least, you will always have some leaders who will want to take a wait and see approach. And at this point, we're going to be calling them the laggers, the ones who are late to the game and will take their time in jumping in. So at the end of the day, we are at a vital point. You can be on the forefront of shaping your industry, your market, or you can make a conscious and deliberate decision to be somewhere in the middle or perhaps be that fast follower, or you can adopt that wait and see approach and take what comes. Quite frankly, it will put you in that reactive position even more. So what I'm recommending is now's the time, Reneel, more than ever, to rethink and seize the moment and evaluate as a leadership team, where do we want to be on this continuum?
That's great perspective, Kim. So as we think about strategy, and you and I, we worked on some of these together, one element when we start to talk about strategy is we know what we are working towards. We know the environment we are in. In a sense, we know the external environment. But today, we have a lot of unknown. We don't know how long COVID is going to last. We don't know when a vaccine will come. Even if it comes, how long will everybody take to get back to some sense of normalcy in our communities? So when there is so much of unknown, how do you begin to kind of work on strategy when what the future holds is somewhat unclear or cloudy?
There's no question that it's certainly cloudy right now, but I have found that some of the ways in which we start to gain that clarity is to assemble our leadership teams to start asking those new questions. Instead of looking at what we need to be doing to react, I want to challenge each and every one of you to take a look at what opportunities have been presented as a result of COVID, as a result of the shifts in industry, in the market, in social trends. You know, the sheer fact that people are fearful of going into business establishments, offices, clinics. They're terribly hesitant. That has shifted an entire set of social behaviors. And so I'm encouraging you to take that step back, and that in and of itself will give you the opportunity as a leadership team to examine whether or not your mission, your vision needs to be adjusted, and the resulting strategies to get there may need to shift based on those market trends, industry trends, social trends. You may also want to take a look at the competitive trends as well as your core competencies. And given your unique core competencies, what are the strengths that we can leverage in this COVID world that now present opportunities? And let me give you a couple examples.
Mm-hmm.
The first example that comes to mind is Medline. Medline produces equipment and supplies that assist in surgeries. And at this point in time, being challenged with COVID and outpatient surgeries are down, they have made a strategic decision to shift focus to PPE. And so, that takes a conscious, deliberate, strategic decision by the leadership team to act and to act quickly, to seize the opportunity. Now, they could have just reacted and gone with the flow, but instead they made a strategic decision. Another organization is Starbucks. And, it is just another analogy. Starbucks has always had a vision of being the third place. They want people to see it as number one, their home, number two, their work, and number three, Starbucks. and they are known for wanting to be known as the third place where people would hang out and spend a substantial portion of their time or day getting a beverage in the cafe and having an experience per se. They had a strategy recently to move towards more drive-throughs as part of their capital equipment, capital initiatives. But it was pushed out a bit. And because of COVID, their leadership team took a step back and decided to accelerate the pace at which they would implement that strategy, given the fact that people no longer had the same comfort level in spending a large amount of time indoors, inside a restaurant, inside a cafe, etc. And so they accelerated the timing of their strategy by quite a bit. So for them, that's a seismic shift in strategy. If once you counted on people being inside the cafe, and making multiple visits during the day and having this experience in the coffee houses. And now people are hesitant to even step in. And so that's a seismic shift. So the question that I would be asking is, what are organizations today doing to assemble their leadership teams to ask these pivotal questions that may cause your own seismic shift in strategic direction? So there's a lot you can be doing, even though we are talking about doing it virtually. Some might question whether or not a strategy session can be done virtually. And I'm hoping that we can talk even further about that Downstream Renewal, because I absolutely believe that it is possible. It just takes some forethought and some planning to make sure that this is happening and that the leadership team is not just reacting.
That's great, Kim. I really enjoyed listening to the two examples you gave. Very relevant. The core of this, is your leadership team and the broader team collectively. And when a team is already tired and maybe fatigued of, recovering from a disastrous situation and business continuity, what are some strategies that you use to shift mindset from business continuity to a mindset of looking at opportunities and creating competitive advantage? How do you pivot?
Yeah, there are definitely steps that you'll want to take as you assemble your teams. And if we look at the next slide, you've got a chart that is a nice way of looking at the process that people go through when we take a step back, we examine a problem, when we examine the direction that we're taking, typically people go through this process and they think they know everything.
Right.
We're in good shape. We know our strategic direction. We know where we're headed from a mission and a vision perspective. And then they dig in further. And as a leadership team, we start asking some of the tough questions, and we find out there's more to this than I thought. And we may have some opportunities here to dig in, and you start to realize we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's until we start to dig even deeper that we may even lack the confidence to figure out how in the world are we going to tackle this? How are we going to get beyond? And how are we going to create a viable business strategy that can either position us as market leader or just help us be a viable, relevant organization going forward in a post-COVID world? And so, I like that chart. But at the end of the day, Reneel, to answer one of your questions, what can you do to really get started?
Mm-hmm.
And I would strongly recommend that you assemble your leadership team, whether it's at the organizational enterprise level, whether that leadership team is at the department or division level, or perhaps it's simply your staff, your immediate staff. And dependent upon your role in the organization, it is incumbent upon us to always be looking forward to create that future instead of react to it. And so I don't want you to think that this is simply the role of the senior leadership team or of the board. These are questions that you'll want to be asking at all of the various leadership levels. So first, I'd be asking your team, what industry trends are we seeing that have implications for us as an organization? You'll then want to look at market trends. What are the market trends that we're facing? Where are the headwinds? Where can we capitalize on some of these trends? And then we've also got social trends or social patterns, so to speak. And at this point, I would ask that we move to the next slide. And so I want you to envision your leadership team as being in the control room. Do you have the opportunity to guide where your organization is headed? And I believe that this is the ideal time to be asking these questions. So we talked about industry trends, what are the market trends, and what are the social trends that we're dealing with? And so much of what we're dealing with in COVID times is around social trends and patterns. What are people willing to do and not willing to do? And it may vary by segments. And so, we really have to step up as leaders to answer some of these questions and examine whether or not our current vision and mission are achievable. And if we believe there's some question mark, what are we willing to do? How do we need to shift direction to be able to ensure that our business is sustainable and viable? Next, you want to take a look at competitive trends. I'm a big believer that if you're ever going to be a market leader or an innovator, so to speak, that while you want to be cognizant of what the competition is doing, it's more important that you carve out how you want to differentiate yourself. And so you still want to know what the competition is doing and where you may be falling behind. But most importantly, you want to be able to define what your competitive advantage is. And so engaging your team in a discussion of what differentiates us is vital to sustaining the business and, most importantly, growing. And the last question that I would encourage you to ask your team is, what are our core competencies? What makes us unique? What differentiates us? And how do we contribute? How do we make a name for ourselves in this marketplace, in this space? And so those are some of the questions that you can be asking your team right now The time is now. It's not 6 months from now or a year from now, because you will be further down that curve and you will be reacting to it, and you will be behind those who have already been asking those questions.
That's perfect, Kim. Now, in terms of regrouping and trying to relook at the strategy and have a strategy session, strategic planning session, we had a good idea what an effective strategy session looks like pre-COVID. But now times are a little different. It's probably going to be virtual. So what does an effective strategy session look like today? And what are the, if you will, the nuts and bolts to do so, to have a great strategy session today?
What I have found is to do these and to do these well in a remote working environment, it's going to be paramount that we are able to break it down into bite-sized pieces. We can have sessions where we have a few critical decisions that need to be made that will advance the strategic direction. So, for example, we may have one strategy session that just talks about our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and engage the team in prioritization of those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so that would be one segment or one decision that needs to be made. How would we prioritize these? And thus, once we've got those prioritized, we have the foundation for the rest of our strategic discussions. The next session could be focused on market and industry trends, social trends, and how we believe we may need to shift some of our thoughts on the vision and the strategies to get the job done. Another session could be focused on core competencies and how we can utilize our core competencies in ways that we haven't done so in the past. So, for example, that Medline example that we talked about earlier, they weren't in PPE before, but now they are. So, what can we do to leverage what we're exceptionally strong at and pivot where we need to be able to shape the new strategy and the new future, the new norm, so to speak. But if we wait too long, we're on the back end of that curve. Some key questions, for example, that you may want to be looking at in a singular 2 to 3 hour session is, what is our organization's delivery model? Do we need to look at that? Do we need to look at how we are going to recruit talent given this new world? So, for example, if we have so many people working remotely, and I realize not all positions can be performed remotely, but those that are, it creates an entirely new opportunity for us to recruit the best and brightest talent from not just a specific region, but now we can recruit them from all over the country. So, for example, technical roles, your high tech, people are leaving Silicon Valley because now they can work from anywhere. They can now recruit from organizations for R&D talent. You don't have to be restricted or limited to a very specific region. And so the point being, that's another opportunity for staffs and leadership teams to re-examine their approach. But you can take it in bite-sized segments and make key decisions in these 3 to 4 hour time blocks instead of allocating 2 to 3 days to do a strategic planning retreat.
That's great. So what you're thinking is they become shorter instead of doing like a retreat, which is a few days back to back in person. And during those sessions, are there any tips or techniques that you find useful to keep the engagement up? Because everybody must be at their homes, might be having distractions, kids, pets, whatnot. So how do you keep the same level of engagement when people might be all over the country or around the world?
There's no question that it's tougher than ever because we do have so many distractions. One of the things that I would strongly recommend, and it really does get down to basics, which is determine what kind of pre-work we can send people in advance. Are there critical, strategic decisions that we're going to need to make? Are there trends that we want them to identify? Are there materials that we want them to read about the social trends, etc.? And chances are there's an awful lot that can be done even before they walk into a virtual meeting. And so I would recommend that be given some significant thought, and don't underestimate the power of doing some of that work in advance. Secondly, there is no reason why we can't use round robin techniques where we pose the strategic issue that needs to be brainstormed, and we literally go around the room expecting each person to contribute that point of view so that everybody has a voice and it's not just those who speak the loudest. And that's also an ongoing, really strong technique. I also believe that it takes a little bit of planning, but to acquaint yourself with these breakout rooms that can be done via these online platforms, whether it's Zoom or whether it's the meeting apps, etc. And you can use these breakout rooms to take your leadership team and move them into small groups of 3 to 4 people, and then reassemble them to read out the discussion that they had in a smaller group. The advantage of doing these virtual breakout rooms is no one can blend into the woodwork. You have a forum where everybody can contribute, and people do not get bored with a 2 or 3 hour meeting because they have these breakout sessions that can indeed be done virtually. And I would also encourage you to use virtual whiteboards and the decision-making techniques, the use of polling questions to poll your people in the here and now, in the moment, will give you opportunities to really engage people so that they're not just blending in and everybody truly has a voice. So those are some of the tips and techniques that I would be using in a virtual setting when I'm facilitating these sessions these days.
That's wonderful, Kim. Now, that's in the actual session. So those are some great tips. Now, what would you say are some of the first steps that you would recommend in, leading the dialogue, to initiate the dialogue and that strategic dialogue, decision makers? How do we set the dialogue, and what are the steps in the run-up to getting a session scheduled?
So just to make sure that I understand where you want to go with this, are you talking about some of the questions that can be asked, some of the what we would call stargazing?
Yes. That, okay, and I was actually with that. I was going to go with what might be some initial steps to get the dialogue going ahead of actually doing the strategic planning session that we spoke about that we'll do virtually.
Okay. I would say that you'll want to do all of that pre-work that we discussed. Send out a SWOT analysis in advance that people then send in to the individual who is leading the strat planning session. That gives us an opportunity to assemble all of that material and have it distributed in advance of the first strategy session, the first meeting. And in doing so, people aren't thinking about those questions on the fly. Instead, they're answering key strategic questions in advance of the meeting so that when you pull everybody together, you have got a summary of where the group stands in terms of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, as well as the industry and market trends and social trends. I would ask that you turn to the slide, which is slide 10, because once you've had that opportunity to have people think strategically in advance of this first session, then there are certain questions that you're going to be wanting to ask. And we've given you some sample questions of what you'll be wanting to ask. So to share a few of those, what are the consumer behaviors, patterns, or changes that are happening that are affecting our ability to deliver products or services? What are some of the interesting or fascinating pieces of data that allow us to seize on a particular trend?
Mm-hmm.
What is the competition doing? What are some of our core competencies and how can we leverage them? And you might even want to be asking, what are some of the innovations during the pandemic that you admire? And does that create an opportunity for your organization to make some changes? And so as we continue to ask these questions of our leadership teams, we are actually creating the new normal. And instead of waiting for it to just happen to us and then reacting to it, your leadership team becomes instrumental in shaping that future or that new normal if you only act upon that opportunity, that window of opportunity now.
That's great, Kim. All the discussion topics, discussion questions rather, that you said for the convenience of of our viewers, we are going to have it in the comment section. So we are going to start putting it out there. And with that, Kim, do you have any other final thoughts before we wrap up today's session?
I would just encourage each and every one of you to take advantage of this unique window that we have in front of us right now. You know, you can make a decision to wait and see, or you can make some critical decisions as a leadership team that seize upon the opportunities. And so it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. Oftentimes we're looking at what we can no longer do, what we can no longer offer, where we can no longer go. But I would really challenge all of us leaders to examine what opportunities have been presented as a result of COVID. And you may find yourself seizing one of those opportunities that can result in a seismic shift in your strategy and carve the way for a new future forward. So I'm very excited about this time, and would welcome any further questions or comments, via LinkedIn or any other channel that you see fit.
That's great, Kim. So my, again, final comments is that the new normal, think of it as a transitionary phase. We are unlikely going to fully go back to what the BC normal or the old normal was. And we are also not in the future normal. The future normal is being shaped. Whether we participate in that shaping or not is our choice. And to your point, Kim, I think there's a golden opportunity for organizations and individuals to jump right in, be architects, and be right in there shaping that future normal, be a part of that in creating that. And this applies to individuals in how you reshape yourself, as well as organizations and industries. So I think this is, again, a golden opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rethink strategy during this time for what gets created in the future. So Kim, I am very grateful for you to taking the time and joining us for one of these mastermind sessions.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, and I wish you well.
You're welcome. And then Kim and I will be back later. We will have the dates for you soon. We will be having another discussion along leadership and talent development during COVID and for COVID and beyond. So we will be back here in a few weeks' time, dates to come soon. Today, during and after this session, we will have comments in the LinkedIn and Facebook sections. And after we stop today, we will still be active answering some of the questions that you all might have. So feel free to type in your questions in the comment section on Facebook as well as LinkedIn Live. Next week, we will be in Mastermind series. It will be Civility in the Workplace, another brilliant mastermind session. So please join us next Wednesday as well, same time, And thank you so much for your following and support to the Mastermind series. Thank you very much.
Thank you.